Tuesday, November 26th, 2019 meeting of the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission to order. Can we, thank you. Yay, one down. Can we do a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Commissioner Santa Croce.
Here.
Commissioner Alkalali is out. Commissioner Walton.
Here.
Commissioner Evans.
Here.
Commissioner Ottman.
Here.
Commissioner Caldwell. Okay. Commissioner Todoro.
Here.
Commissioner Ameri.
I'm here.
Commissioner Billups. We have a quorum. And Councilwoman Lund. Okay.
Sorry, guys.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda.
How would you like it amended?
I would like to add an update on Officer Alvarez to the new business, and also to move the city attorney's report to after the approval of the minutes.
Is there a second? I think you do have to vote.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so moved.
Do we officially have quorum?
Yes,
Yes.
I was counting before.
We're now home, what's our number now? We're
10.
10.
10.
So the
Numbers 10.
quorum should be six.
6.
We have six.
So is there a motion
5, 6, 7,
to
we have 8.
approve the agenda as amended?
I
So moved.
seconded.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. And we have a guest speaker, Ariane Slave from the City Attorney's Office, who is going to talk about Warrant Resolution Day.
No, let me give you.
But did you not suggest that to be postponed?
We need to get our graphics up, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. And I will pass
Okay, you have tried.
copies for you to take. And I emailed a copy of this to Denise to send out to you, and Denise, if you don't mind sending to the HRC as well.
Sure.
Feel free to post, print or transmit at will. The city will be hosting our first ever Warrant Resolution Day on December the 16th. It is in night court fashion, so we are going to be hosting from noon until 8 p.m. The goal is to allow people to walk in on their outstanding warrants. Now, we have in the city of Ann Arbor over 2,000, I think it's actually close to 2,300 outstanding bench warrants in the criminal court in Ann Arbor. What I have learned as of late is that there are a lot of barriers for people to come in. Some people are afraid that they're going to be arrested on driving offenses. While in Ann Arbor we don't do that, there are judges across the state and even some in our county that will arrest you on a traffic-related warrant, like driving with license suspended. So that is a barrier for people. Of course, if they are arrested, someone has to care for their children. That could come into a CPS referral if they're held overnight. And then this is a vicious cycle. So the goal is that you are able to walk in, you can meet with a public defender or somebody who will be volunteering for the day, or if you choose to represent yourself, you can meet with your assigned prosecutor. That could be myself or Matt Thomas from the City Attorney's Office, or a representative from the County Prosecutor's Office, and we can resolve your case. We are not advertising this for domestic violence related cases. Those have a additional component for safety, so these are for your non-assaultive cases. Here's the cool part about the day. It's not just a day to walk in on your case and we'll get your warrant recalled, but it is 15th District Court over in the Justice Center is going to be set up as a hallway of services. And I'm not sure if you've been over to the courthouse, but we have a very long hallway. And it's very wide, and so we'll have at least 15 community partners set up with tables to share whatever resources that may be in need of the community. So we have Washtenaw Community College and their pathways for a GED program, Safe House Center, Michigan Works. We've invited Washtenaw Literacy, we haven't heard back yet. The Shelter Association, Avalon Housing, Community Mental Health. So a lot of folks will be there that day. So the goal is that we can, what we do in the city prosecution every day is to hook you up with your available resource that you might need, which might present a barrier as to why you didn't walk in the first place. Hook you up with your service and then work that into the disposition of your case. So for cases where it's appropriate, if there needs to be a sentence or there is a finding of guilt, if we're not having some kind of resolution that would involve a dismissal, the probation agents will be there to do same-day pre-sentence investigations, so we can kind of wrap things up, so things, this is not a situation where the wheels of justice are slow. We can actually provide you with same-day servicing. Community corrections will be there as well. From the Office of the Sheriff's Department, they provide substance abuse screening, and with them will also be Dawn Farm. So for those people who are in need of screening or outpatient services for substance abuse, that'll be there, and monitoring in the community as well. So it sounds like it's going to be an awesome day. The national average for return on these days is usually about 10%, so we're hoping to have over 200 cases closed on this day, which would be amazing. I would really appreciate if you could help the city publicize this. We do have a very tiny budget to advertise on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. The city's communications department is doing that. But predominantly this is going to be a social media campaign with our community partners. So that would be you as well. So if you would pass this out in your respective communities, that would be appreciated. The goal is to allow people to have a fresh start in 2020. And this is going to be really important for a lot of people. There have been barriers. There are people who are afraid to request entitlements, SNAP benefits, food stamps, things of that nature, because they're afraid of being arrested. That doesn't happen, but that is a legitimate fear that people have. So if they are able to do this and clear their warrants and still get into the DHS office by the 17th, there's a good chance that they can have all their entitlements turned back on if they're on suspension before the kids get out of school. So that means we have less hungry kids over winter break. So it's super important. If you can pass it out, I'd appreciate it.
And Denise has a digital form?
And Denise has a digital form, so she can email that out to you tomorrow.
What about members of the community who might not be living in the city of Ann Arbor? They live like Pittsfield or live in Serenity or they live in other places. Would this be applicable to them, or they have to go through a different process, or is there something else?
So Ann Arbor has, of all the jurisdictions of all the district courts, Ann Arbor has the smallest number of open warrants. Our goal right now, we could only do the 15th district court, so only cases that have started in the city of Ann Arbor. Our goal is to provide a blueprint. So getting all of our community partners together, and if we are successful, then we can give our blueprint to Pittsfield, which is 14A1 District Court. They can have their own event, and then 14B, which is Ypsilanti Township, and hopefully this will be a regular occurrence that we're doing countywide, so that we don't have people to have this. It doesn't always have to be a negative interaction when you're dealing with the criminal justice system. That's the goal.
So it's basically, this is for the residents of Ann Arbor.
It doesn't have to be a resident, it just has to be that the warrant has to be generated out of the city.
Okay.
Yes, and you can contact, if you have questions, you can contact the city attorney's office. Our contact information is on the bottom, or the 15th district court. Or you can stop by also and check in the courthouse. If you'd like to have an attorney in advance, you can stop by the court and they can assign you an attorney the day in advance. The local bar association sent out a solicitation for criminal defense attorneys. We already have 2 attorneys who do the indigent defense, and then Madam Defender Delphia Simpson has offered her services, and some of her staff members will be coming over to assist as well. So for the criminal defense bar, several attorneys are coming over to offer a day of service, and they're doing pro bono service for the day as well. So we should have more than enough staff to help. Any other questions?
I got a couple.
Of course.
I'm sorry I'm late.
Yeah.
Glad you're doing this. This is really amazing. Sounds extremely progressive in the criminal justice system. I take it this is the first time. Has this been
Yes.
done before?
No, not in our county.
No, okay. And that was my second question, who nearby has done this?
I haven't found one in Michigan. They tried to do one in Grand Rapids. Unfortunately, they parked a police cruiser out front, so it looked like it was like a setup, and they didn't have a great response.
Surprise!
It was, and something in Kent County, it didn't go over too well. They didn't have a great turnout. I'm hoping this will be different. The spirit of this day, in terms of resolving things with the community, is what we've been doing at the city attorney's office for the last 2 years. This is just like kind of on a grander scale, and now we're bringing the county prosecutor's office into the fold. So this, hopefully, this is game changing.
And then I have a second question: is folks that have bench warrants out for their arrest, who face jail time, if they come to this, are they gonna get kind of cuffed and taken away and miss Christmas, or?
No, so the goal for this is we don't have, these are for misdemeanors only, and we have available options for people who have been a flight risk. So community corrections will be there. If we feel like you might be a flight risk, we can give you a GPS bracelet if that's an issue in lieu of going to jail. Now, if somebody comes in with like a homicide warrant, they're not gonna go. We're not letting them go. If someone comes in because they raped a child, we're not gonna let them go. We're advertising as us, we're being that pretty clear. This is for misdemeanor turn-in warrants. Looking at this kind of countrywide, people who have those open warrants don't come to things like this. So, we're prepared to deal with it if that happens. It's not unusual. We actually, kind of on a regular basis, we have people from out of our jurisdiction who just show up at Ann Arbor PD because they are like, hey, we heard your police are nice, and I have a felony warrant out of another jurisdiction, so I'm turning myself in here so I don't get beat up. That has happened in Ann Arbor. We're kind of going for that. So, that could happen, but in terms of the 15th District Court, we're being pretty clear that COM team actually has a little video that they're getting ready to put out on Facebook as well, so kind of stay tuned to the city's Facebook page. They'll have a 30-second video on how the day will work, and it's cartoon with stick figures. It's kind of cute.
So is there some sort of special, so people go to jail every day in this city on nonviolent misdemeanor warrants?
No.
I saw it yesterday morning. I mean,
Yeah.
it happens pretty regularly. It might not be a policy. It might be they're out 2 or 3 times, but it happens. I've got plenty of clients inside, right?
Okay.
The question is, we're not making any guarantee. Are we describing this?
The judges have agreed that they are not.
Period.
People are not going into
Right.
custody on non-domestic violence related non-assaultive warrants
Period.
on this day. Yes.
So that's just something that I would, because I've got plenty of clients who are afraid to be even in this building to pay a parking ticket for that reason.
Okay.
So as long as I just think you need to be extra clear about that.
Yes, this is what the judges have committed to.
Non-assaultive, non-domestic violence.
Right.
Non-assaultive, non-domestic violence.
I mean, if that can be, put in stone, so to speak, because I think what Mr. Sancochi said is true.
It doesn't. The thing is, I think this is great. But it doesn't say that there.
It's just non-violent misdemeanors.
It says non-violent.
You weren't being
So it's got to be non-violent, non-assaultive. So if you've got a high misdemeanor, an assault and battery or something, you could go. Right?
I'm not sure what a high.
If you've got an assault and battery misdemeanor.
I would say
But
that's a violent misdemeanor.
Right.
So anything non-violent.
Yes. And anything, I would say anything domestic violence is
Probably off the.
violent.
Yeah. Period.
Yeah.
By definition.
All right. Thank you.
you.
We will get it out.
All right, so in light of your amendment,
Public comment, approval of minutes, and right back to you.
okay.
Thank you.
Public comment. If there's anyone who wants to make a comment at this time.
Hi.
Hello?
I have a comment, but I have a question. Can I ask her, or do I have to address you? Or are you lenient tonight?
Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Shirley Beckley.
Do you have something for us and something for her?
Yes.
Okay, do us first.
Okay. I was a little confused at the community meeting that I went to and was canceled and then missed the next one. And wanna hope that that doesn't happen again.
We
I don't
apologize.
know what happened.
We don't normally
Can I
respond to
say
public
something?
commenters. I did the same thing. I showed up at the Bryan Community Center.
So,
And,
I
yeah.
think Commissioner Miri was about to jump in.
Oh,
You know, we made arrangement with the community center and we put the announcement out with their approval and they put it out also. Then something happened at the center, not
It
from
was a
us.
Halloween party.
And they said, sorry, we made a mistake, you know, we cannot do it that day, but after they approved the day. It's not like we changed it. We did not change it. So we have two options, cancel it or change the date. And we decided to change the date. That's exactly what happened. We didn't really have control of it.
Right.
Lisa,
Okay.
if I may, just to clarify though, I did actually go to Bryan Community Center on that date and there was no activity there at all. There was nothing going on that night. If you stop by, I could, and there was a notice on the door saying that there was, you know, that we were to have this community meeting that night. So there was a notice still posted on the door at the Bryan Community Center. So yeah, in terms of how we communicated this, we can be better, need to do
Except
better.
you forgot to check your email. We emailed you. You just forgot to check.
Okay, because I did show up and I walked around, I tried every entrance and hopefully.
I do think they did change on us at the very
yeah.
last minute, and they had a commitment with their kids, and I don't know what their activity
But it was also confusing because there was still a notice. No one took the notice off the door that there was to be this
I mean, it's
community
not
meeting.
our job. I mean, when you work with community, it's not like you work with community-based organization, and they don't always like have the staff and I mean, they canceled on us, and we send a notice that this is what happened. I don't know that not everybody got it, but we.
Well, I didn't
we
get
did.
a notice. Well, let me tell you, I went, my grandson goes there, so he was there. So I knew what was going on. So I was confused, but I went anyway because I didn't receive anything saying not to go. So I know Sky, so I talked to Sky because the kids were all outside. And on their, what they were doing, they were taking them to hike home to the haunted house that was going on over there. So they were walking. And so he said because they had so many kids, they had to cancel. And I was like, okay. Then he said, well, we'll make sure that you know when the next one is. But I never got anything, email or anything of when the next one was, so I missed the
Well, we will
next
double
one.
down our efforts
So
to
I
keep
was
everybody
hurt.
posted.
And distraught.
Well, we did not mean to distress you.
So I just want to let you know, yes, when you're dealing with the community and us grassroots folks, some kind of way you got to let us know something. So
And we will start
usually I
tweeting.
take the bus, but luckily my daughter took me. So
Do you
and
do
she
Twitter?
waited. I don't know nothing about Twitter.
Okay.
I'm doing good to do Facebook. I'm doing good to be on the computer.
Okay.
Just to let
Well,
you
we apologize for that. Did you have another thing for us?
Are you gonna discuss what happened at the community meeting tonight?
Yes.
Is that on the agenda?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And, I just wanna say that I hope we, as the community, I didn't know, just to be honest, I didn't know if that was intentional or what it was. And I just wanted to make sure you're
We
not-
are relying on the community and depending on the community, and one of our biggest goals is to interact with the community out out of here, out in people's spaces. And so we regret for anybody who was confused or felt that we didn't value their time and that we didn't sort of update well enough, because we wouldn't have wanted to waste your time. But we also don't want to develop a reputation for that, because we want people to invite us places and we want to go out and we want to talk to people, because every time we do, we meet people who say, we didn't know you existed. It's good to know where to go to complain. And so that's our goal. And so we really wanted the chance to go out, to the Bryan Community Center, and we regret the confusion, misinformation, and lack of information.
Well, I
So it
understand.
definitely wasn't deliberate. We weren't trying to like,
Well, I understand things happen. So,
we'll do better.
but I just didn't get anything afterwards. I didn't get well, we're sorry this happened, but we're gonna do this. There was nothing. So that's why I didn't know what that was.
Well,
I mean,
we will do better.
thank you.
You are
I will
welcome.
certainly hope so, because the other thing I wanted to just address you and say that I am so depending on this commission. I know you can't do everything I would like you to do, but I think the commission is moving in the right direction, and that most of you are really trying to make sure that we have a better solution to things between the community. Because I'm still concerned of bridging that gap between the community and the police. And that's a big concern.
It's a big gap
And it's
in
a
some
big gap.
areas.
And I did get a call, as you know, because I did talk to Lisa, from Aura's mother, to let me know it was 5 years since her daughter has died. And she was very supportive when my son died on Facebook. And so now I really know how she feels as losing my own child. And not in that way, but from someone who has a drug addiction. And I know you're not wrapping your brain around all this, but I'm just throwing it out that when things maybe get smoother, that maybe we can come and use this commission to help us to do something to help our drug addicts that need help. Because there's so many hoops. I watched my son struggle with this addiction of heroin, but there was no help unless he could be homeless, and he couldn't go to the homeless shelter because he used, so he couldn't get in. So you don't have, you're just out here. And so that I'm using that as an example so that hopefully we can do something in this city and county where we can help people, because they can't fight drugs and have all these hoops they gotta jump through. Even though, you know, they may have made the mistake of using drugs. But once you're on it, you're hooked. And so you need help to get off. So I just, I was happy to see with the Human Rights Commission, there was some gentleman there that's trying to talk about all this. So hopefully we can come together and do something about that. Yes, you're pointing to,
One thing is part of our training, always since we were discussing this, is to invite other presenters, speakers who have experience in these areas. And we will have that open for the public. What are the available resources for people who have addiction, whatever they have, and how they can get the help they need. What are the things that are available in the society to make sure that they are weaning from what they are doing and probably live a normal life. Well, this is part of all the things that we'd like to pursue.
I'm glad to hear that, because I think this is, between this commission and the Human Rights Commission, maybe together we can, when I say we, the community will have somewhere to go to try to do something. Because the gentleman that was at the Human Rights Commission, he had also been an ex-con, and he was talking about how hard, he had to buy a house because he wasn't able to rent. And my son was an ex-con, so he couldn't rent. He was denied everywhere he went. So you don't have anywhere to go to live other than on the streets. And as a mother, I wasn't gonna let him be on the street. I would never do that to any of my children. So we need to do something, hopefully, in the near future. I'm not just saying, I'm not presenting that to do, but just thought I'd throw it out there.
Thank
But I do have a question.
you. Okay, wait.
Oh,
Just ask her when you go over there.
oh, excuse me.
No, it's all right. What, in case someone else has a public comment?
Excuse me, honey. Well, I didn't know, I'm trying to use all my time, because you know I can come back.
Just
But-
go over there and ask her.
Oh, just go over there and ask her?
Just ask.
I can't do it publicly?
Oh, is it a big public question?
It ought to be.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think
We'll put you on the clock this time, though,
Yes, sir, right.
before they.
This is.
3 minutes.
So what do you tell, are you excusing me?
Go ahead, ask your big question.
The question I have is on this, I have a grandson that
Yes, right.
has a felony. He went he was put in, he served his time. So to get this expunged, what I was told is you can only have one felony in a family.
No, there's actually going to be,
Where can we go to get this, to know whether they're capable of coming to get this?
we're
taken
going to
care
have a table for expungement information. One of our local attorneys,
That
Robin
day?
McCoy, that day. Robin McCoy and then a couple of the public defenders will be there to give expungement information. So throughout the day, you don't have to be coming in on a warrant, you can come in and just utilize the services for the day. It's open to everyone in the community. So if he's interested in coming in to find out information about expungements, there will be at least one attorney there giving information about expungements.
So it's not a guarantee that he'll get it expunged?
Not a guarantee. It depends on the type of expungement, the time that it passed, if there's any restitution owed, it kind of, and then again, the judge gets to make the final decision.
But we paid all the money, so
Okay.
he doesn't know anything, so.
My advice would be to have him come in on that day, and then there are attorneys who are gonna be giving out advice on that day, so bring all the documentation with them.
Oh, and the documentation, if he doesn't have the court papers,
That's
where
okay.
can we call? Can we call, or you're gonna have it, or how?
They'll have someone there who has access. Is it in Washtenaw County?
Mhm.
They'll have someone who has access to the court records and the building.
I just wanted to clarify that because we were told if you had someone else in the family that had a felony, that they couldn't come.
Okay.
Thank you for my extended time.
You are welcome, thank you. Any other public comments?
My name is Sergeant Donovan Smith. I'm a resident of Ann Arbor. So I have a question for the ICPOC, a possible request to see if we can get some data and make it available to the community. On July 19th, 2018, the AAPD published a report called, actually I don't have the name of the report in front of me, but it's a report on traffic stops in Ann Arbor. It was issued during the summer when the task force was impaneled, but it wasn't widely publicized, and I haven't been able to find any newspaper articles about it. So it seems like it was published. It's published by the AAPD, but it was finished using the work of a consulting firm called the Dolan Consulting Group. The main writer of the report is a man named Dr. Richard Johnson, who's a criminologist, but he's actually often most cited in the right wing, among right-wing news sources on Fox News, the National Review, and others, because he's trying through work across the country to demonstrate that racial profiling is not occurring in small cities. He uses a very specific methodology where he matches small subsets of data within a city instead of looking at comprehensive data about stops. He's also often cited because he's the kind of purveyor of statistics that would suggest that black men are not being targeted by police or being killed by police in larger numbers than other segments of the population. And he's gone as far to suggest that the leading cause of death for black men is other black men. So he's a really problematic figure, and it seems strange that the AAPD spent money on a report that is written by this man. I can provide a copy of it. It's on the city website, but it's sort of hidden. He also, in reports and journal articles that he's written, he defames and suggests that, for example, Michael Brown attacked Officer Darren Wilson. He teases around concepts like the Ferguson effect, which has been widely debunked. So he's a very fringe figure, but nonetheless, he was hired by the city of Ann Arbor to provide statistics that, at least according to this report, demonstrate that there is no racial profiling in the city. So what I would like to actually ask the ICPOC is if it's possible to make a request for the full data set so that local social scientists, community activists, community members could actually look at the raw data that Dolan Consulting and Dr. Richard Johnson were using and actually try and understand how these kinds of reports are being produced all across the country and why a firm like this would be hired by Ann Arbor. So I think it should be fairly straightforward to ask for such a data set as someone who's worked in social science research. If the data set was produced for research like this at a time before, it should be the case that they could actually reproduce it and demonstrate that it's exactly the same as before. And I'd also like the city or the AAPD to detail how much was spent on the report, to provide, if possible, a copy of the RFP for this work, to actually understand if the AAPD was seeking out this specific research to debunk the possibility of racial profiling in Ann Arbor, and if they had heard about Dolan Consulting through other police departments and then sought out this kind of work, and then to explain the process under which such a shady provider of essentially racist quack social science was contracted by the city. So I'd like some people who were involved in this to kind of account for how this work was done, explain how much was paid for it, and then actually provide to the community the data that was used so that we could work as a community or with the ICPOC to debunk this kind of consulting, which is actually happening all over the country in the wake of social movements like Black Lives Matter and in the wake of police killings of Black folks and others across the country. So that was one request. And then I actually have a second quick request. I'll be as quick as I can. So there was a recent article published in Click on Detroit about the AAPD. The only two people I think interviewed were officers Murdoch and Van Alstyne. It appears that the article was actually sort of a PR attempt because it is actually just a profile of these two officers explaining specific details about policing in Ann Arbor.
Repeat their names.
Officers Murdoch and Van Alstyne. But the things that they say in this interview are kind of problematic. According to Murdoch, the reason for the absence of beat cops downtown is the economic recession of 2008. But my own investigation of Ann Arbor and city budgets would suggest that this is actually patently false, that the AAPD budget has been protected more or less since the recession in 2008, and that many other city departments were cut back, but that AAPD and first responders largely were protected. So I'd actually like to see the data that these two officers are speaking about, and that would include budgetary data for the AAPD going back to 2008 and an explanation of this supposed reduction in the AAPD budget. The officers detail how their work is to serve public property, quote unquote. A lot of people have a misconception that that's us telling people they can't be somewhere. That's not the case at all. This is a private business exercising their right to have control over their public property. The officers then go on to confess that they give their personal cell phone numbers to business owners in downtown Ann Arbor so that those owners can circumvent calling 911 and can call them directly if there are issues, which again poses lots of problems because this data then wouldn't be available in any way. Those business owners could be racially profiling or profiling other marginalized communities in Ann Arbor, as I expect they are. And then this would sort of be off the books. I think it's worth noting that both Ali Ramlawi has a business downtown and Francis Todor Hargreaves works closely with the AAPD for Art Fair and the State Street Association, and I think it would be useful for both of them to account for possible personal knowledge of how this works, how businesses essentially have private police at their behest downtown. And I'd like to know if the AAPD actually reached out to Click on Detroit offering this information, again, seeking to sort of promote their good work and making both what appear to be false statements and then also revealing practices downtown that seem quite problematic. The last thing I just want to bring to your attention to put on the record as public knowledge, I'd like the record to note that Officer David Reed, who killed Ora Rosser on November 10th, 2014, he's been promoted to sergeant and now supervises other officers within the AAPD. He makes over $100,000 a year. On August 2nd, there was a tweet issued by the AAPD Twitter account publicly congratulating Officer Reed. It says, "Thank you, Senior Officer Paddock and Motor Officer Sergeant Reed, for getting us up to speed." He's photographed in the congratulation, along with a picture of a sheet cake, and I just wanted that entered into the public record.
Can I just say something? Yes. The cuts to PD go back to 2001, so I would like her request to go back to 2001 as opposed to 2008. Do you mind?
Not at all. Oh, they refer to 2008 as I think the time period when the cuts start.
Mm-hmm.
But
and that's
more
not
data is better
correct.
data, so absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. So there are, you made many interesting points, many of which we'd be interested in. And we have some experts in the room, however, we will maybe reach out to them through some more formal channels to ask about,
Have to go back further than that. Oh, yeah.
the rationale for the RFP for the first study that you referenced. City council may know something about that.
About the budget?
No, about the publication by the Dolan Consulting Group that hired Richard Johnson. The RFP, I don't know if police do
No.
that, if you guys
I'm
approve
guessing
that.
it was under 25,000 because that did not come to us.
Okay, so, but there are lots of interesting things that we could take a look at and ask questions about and see where they take us. Thank you for bringing that to us, Ms. Smith. Are there any other public comments at this time? Seeing no one,
Exactly.
we can move on. Is there a motion? I am sure that you all have carefully read the minutes from the last meeting. Is there a motion? I have full confidence in you. Is there a motion to approve them as they are?
Make a motion.
Second.
Do you need to discuss, make corrections, or shall we take a vote on their approval? Hearing no, all in favor of approving of the minutes? Any opposed?
And an abstention. I wasn't here.
Okay, but did you,
You weren't
you're correct, you cannot attest to them because you're not here, thank you. And so we have one abstention, and that is fair. Let us move on. City Attorney Slay will be returning to the hot seat,
Thank you.
as it were. And we had some questions about processing of police information. We are aware that information often goes we may request documents or reports in terms of evaluating complaints, and the police produces the reports, gives them to the city attorney's office for processing, and that processing can include redaction. And then those documents are turned over to us, and we use those in our assessment of a complainant's complaint. We know that several city attorneys have worked on these over time, and so we understand the timeline of that. We have at least one specific example, however, where it appears that the police produced several documents that were relevant to this person's complaint, and only one of them made it to us. This was in the summer. The first time we saw this was, I believe, in July. But we didn't receive the other two documents. When we were at the police department reviewing body cam and dash cam footage, we saw that other documents existed. We were able to review them, and that made us concerned about what other documents might have been lost in the black hole of the city attorney's office.
Correct.
We were also very concerned about the time that it has taken in some cases to get information. It seems as if the police is kind of on their job, turning things over quickly, but that city attorney's office is holding things for forever, not forever literally, but for an awfully long time, such that we have lots of things pending that we would like to review but don't have them because nobody is there to redact them. And I know we have gone through different iterations of what it might take to see some of those things unredacted. So one of the things we'd like to speak to is the city attorney's understanding of why things are redacted. Are things redacted because we should never see them, or are things redacted because we should not have them in our possession, or because they shouldn't leave the police building, or so what's the rationale for redaction? And then if there is a we're really concerned about the time and the staff to do this.
Couple of questions then. So I will start with, I'm not sure what was going on in the first, I just recently got involved in the redaction, so I can tell you that by happenstance I had the last two complaints, and those were assigned to me. I was able to get them back to you in 3 days after getting them, but that was just kind of a fluke that I had 3 days because my judge was out of town, and so that was able to work out that I was able to devote 3 full days to redacting complaints. The tricky part is that everyone in the city attorney's office was gainfully employed before the police commission came to be. So we are not really staffed to be able to handle the additional workload. And I understand that it ebbs and flows, and so sometimes we may have no complaints, and I understand there's nothing pending in the hopper now that we need to, I haven't gotten an email from Lieutenant Tile saying that there's something to be reviewed, because right now I'm kind of the person who it would go to. So I don't understand that there's anything waiting for me. But I think in the beginning, we were not sure as to whose responsibility it was going to be doing for the redactions. That's probably, and we weren't sure which documents that we're gonna go over. So I think that might have been the confusion in the beginning. I feel like those bugs have been ironed out, and that we have, in the last 2 processes that I did, all the documents that the police had were given to me, and I redacted them, and I think you guys got them in a pretty timely fashion. I think 3 days is beyond reasonable. Everyone was happy with that.
3 days seems fine.
I think that's great, and I think that's
Months,
uncharacteristic of
however, are
that.
never not fine.
I would say that I would agree with you that that is not fine. I think that there should be maybe discussion as to how this is going to work going forward. I don't think it's tenable for the city attorney's office to be able to commit to be able to doing the redactions going forward. It is just we all have, I mean, this wasn't contemplated in the beginning.
Right.
And I can tell you that it can take for Denise, maybe it was like 12 or 15 pages. It did take me about 15 hours just to get through that one complaint.
So I think, and we'll obviously have a full discussion at some other time,
Sure.
but it's good for us to start thinking about the fact that there isn't necessarily with the formation of the Police Oversight Commission, there was an understanding that we were going to ask the police for lots of documents, and that the city attorney's office wanted to process those documents before they came to us, but that there was no allocation within the city attorney's office or no extra money allocated to the city attorney's office for a human to do that.
Sure.
And so it's important for us to sort of put that out there. And I don't know if that means that city council needs to work on that as a function of our existence. Obviously not your issue. Likewise, we have also heard from the police that we pose an extra burden, if you will, although they are not complaining, but it is work for them to then, provide us with the things that we need. We do exist though, and so we do need the things that we need, and we
Sure.
Have to continue to ask for the
Can
things
I
we
ask a
need.
question?
You can't interrupt me to ask it, Ali.
I'm sorry.
So it's important for us to continue to do that, and it's important for us to figure out what's a reasonable time frame to do that. So 72 hours is fantastic, but we know that was just a glitch because your judge was gone, and so there were other things you didn't have to do at the time, and we know that city attorneys will have to make choices between doing what we need and doing the other things that they need to do, and that puts you in a tough spot, but it also puts us in a tough spot.
Sure.
And so we know that there's an obligation to the community for us to be able to do our work in a timely fashion, and so it's important for us to have that conversation.
And I'm willing to kind of be on standby, I guess, until you guys figure out a process, and just being patient. Then it might not be 72 hours next time. It might take me a week or so to be able to get that while you guys figure out a process. In terms of why I think, at least for a review process, that it does go through the city attorney's office, there is certain information that can go into the reports that is backfilled by the Law Enforcement Information Network. And that information is what they would call privileged information. Now, I know, Chair, you looked into finding out if it would be okay if a civilian or a couple members from your board were able to get clearance and maybe take the classes and be approved people from the state police to get this lien clearance where you could look at unredacted versions of the police reports. And I did have the opportunity to talk to the state police and to do the investigation myself, and it's not possible. It's for law enforcement purposes only. They will not give a commission. There's another commission in Grand Rapids that is new as well. They were requesting similar clearance. They're not going to have access
What's the
either.
basis of the privilege?
It is, you just get the blessing from the state police or
No, but what's the basis of the privilege claim that it's not public information from a public body that's available? So you just said there was a privilege to it, and that's why you can't have it. I'm trying to understand the legal privilege that's being claimed.
I'd be happy to send you the information from the state police.
Can we put it on the public record? Yeah, we want.
I want to hear, so I get that information when I sue a police department? So I'm not sure why, if we're investigating a complaint, we're not entitled to it. And without hearing the privilege, I'm not questioning that there is one.
Sure.
This isn't my area, but I understand. But I also know that I've seen plenty of this stuff without any license or special clearance or anything else. So I'm trying to understand what the privilege that's being asserted is.
Well, we're not the holder of the privilege, so that's.
Right, but someone else is no, I get it. I get you're not saying you can't have it. It's someone else. What I'm trying to.
I'd be happy to provide a legal memo, and we can give it to the commission, and you guys can
Great.
disseminate it however you
Yeah,
want.
and I'm not even asking you to write. I mean, I'm not trying to make work for you. I'm just trying to. What I'm hearing is that there's a privilege and you can't. There's a privilege and you can't see it. I think that's fine, and if that's the case, then we can't see it. But I don't understand what the privilege being asserted is, and I understand that the city's not asserting it. But I think we have got.
So, for example, the Michigan State Police works with the FBI to maintain this network of information, but there are civilian oversight commissions in other places that do get clearance to see it. And so, my question is then, can the Michigan State Police be compelled to grant us access,
Well,
even though clearly they don't want to?
It all starts with what the privilege is.
Right.
Right.
And so we know that that's happened in civilian oversight commissions in other states, and so we have to pursue that and are beginning to work on that now.
Yes.
It may be
So
perfectly valid.
we've
It's
taken
just
an oath
you can't
and-
assess it.
Sure. Right.
And there is a criminal misdemeanor component associated with disseminating lien information to unauthorized people.
Mhm.
So the danger in it is if Lieutenant Tile or myself, who do have that access, were to show you information that you were unauthorized, then we'd be committing a
Yeah,
misdemeanor.
and no one wants that.
Or likewise. And so, that's the reason why we have asked that it go through the city attorney's office to make sure that the redactions were proper. Just, not just to protect the city, but to protect all of you as well. We wouldn't want that.
And
being
that's the
forwarded
only
along.
information that's getting redacted?
Yes.
And the nature of that information? Ongoing criminal investigation stuff? I mean, what's the what is the lien info that we're redacting?
Well, I mean, sometimes it's social security numbers, sometimes it's contact information. It's going to be very similar to FOIA. Have you had an opportunity to look at the last two
No, I haven't.
complaints or redactions?
I haven't seen them
I
yet.
think if you have an opportunity to look at them, you can see we, I think, developed a pretty good, they're readable.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Right. So in the
Redacted.
first one, we had the complaint's name redacted. We
Yeah,
had.
and it's hard to read. So we
Yeah.
substituted, let's say if it was gym shoe and barbed wire. So we would, substitute that for, complainant A and complainant B, and we would keep that consistent. Officer 1, Officer 2, so that it was something that made sense as opposed to just black bars.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
where
no.
you're like, what the heck? And then we would put venue A, venue B, so that it actually makes sense. Like you're actually reading something that makes sense.
Yeah.
The only problem is sometimes the complainants have divulged that information to us already. Like they've told us their
And then-
names, so we know their names, and we know where it
then that's-
happened, and we know, and yet we're reading a report where all that stuff's redacted.
Right.
But then you have the information, but we're still not violating lien. If you have the information from some other means, no harm, no foul. That's okay. But we're not, as a city, doing that. So if you get it from another means, then that's fine. It's just, it's not the city providing it to you or the police department.
So, back during the summer, we approved a process with a flow chart that is on our website, so people understand how the process works. Do you not have this, or do you have this?
That came from the city attorney's office.
That came
Yeah.
from
Chris.
Chris Frost.
Right.
Chris
Okay.
Frost, okay.
Yeah.
So if someone goes in and files a complaint with PD according to this, Once PD has finished their investigation, we then get the data, do our investigation, we're able to ask questions, go through the regular process, correct?
That's my understanding. I think since that form was created, we agreed to additional documentation. I think that's maybe
Right.
where the hiccup
Right,
was, is that we didn't contemplate all the information that you needed in the beginning.
right, exactly.
We talked about just the complaint form, but since then we realized that you need additional information. And so
So I just wanna
police
make sure
department's
that
made
everyone in the
accommodation.
attorney's office is aware of how this works,
Mhm.
so that if we're trying to reach out to witnesses or complainants, we're not then told, oh, well, PD's done their report, so this is closed. You're done, you can't do anything now.
So for
Because that's not
example,
the way this flow chart works, because if that's the way the attorney's office wants to run it, then we need to reevaluate all this, because then your work, your redactions and everything have to be done before PD's report's done. And that's that's causing a lot of confusion.
so we had a situation where we had a complaint that we were reviewing. I had a question and wanted additional clarification. And Margaret Radabot in the city attorney's office told us that we could not have that clarification because the person had not complained to us, they had complained to the police, and therefore we were not to investigate it, that we were sort of doing it for practice. There were several people who immediately realized that that was counter to the ordinance, but I checked the ordinance and I read it carefully. I'm not an attorney, but I'm a very good reader. And so I contacted, and so I asked Denise to please clarify, and she did. She spoke with Ms. Radabot, who was emphatic that we were not only to not pursue it, we were to file it and note.
And keep it as, for our record and reference, and, to have it as, practice for us in the future.
Right, and obviously it's a waste of our entire time, and we don't do what we do to practice. When I reached out to Ms. Radabot for clarification, I cited several pieces of the ordinance that suggested she was incorrect, and she then contacted me and said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that you should just file it away and do it for practice. You can certainly follow up. I just thought maybe the complainant would be confused because you were contacting them instead of the police, and the police had already resolved it. And so that caused among our group some difficulty understanding whether she had some confusion or was unfamiliar with the ordinance, or whether there was any amount of disingenuity there, or what that was. But we, this is part of what Francis is getting at.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that if you're not here, or if you're busy and somebody else steps in and says, I'll take over redactions or whatever,
Sure.
that they understand that we do have a process here
Sure.
that we have told the public about, and the public's going to hold us to that. And we need to make sure that we're all working together to make this happen, because maybe it is a learning process in the sense that the complainants need to know that they'll get a report from PD, but they also may get a follow-up report from the commission, so that they do get to know who we are, and they're not surprised when somebody contacts them or Denise calls them. But that, they may very well get that, and that's something that, just they'll get their closed thing and their final report from the police department, but we are still actively taking part in our investigation, and we may have questions for them.
And that is a legal appropriate thing for us to do based on the ordinance
Exactly.
that was written. And so because of that confusion, I think at this point we're full of goodwill, and we're willing to sit with the fact that people may be unfamiliar with the ordinance.
That's the, yeah.
But we do
It's a
rely.
visual presentation of the
Sure.
ordinance, that's why
Right,
this
no,
is
I
done.
meant the literal
Yes.
ordinance. I mean the
Yeah.
literal
Right,
ordinance.
but this did not detract from the ordinance in any way.
Right.
This is
Right.
a
And so my point is
visual
that.
interpretation of the ordinance.
Right, and so Francis is referring to that, I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm referring to the literal ordinance, which is what I was discussing
Yeah.
with Attorney Radabot. So, we're willing to acknowledge that people might not be familiar with it, and perhaps when she got to read it, as I sent it to her, the passages, it made more sense to her. But we do rely on the city attorney's office because at this point, there's a debate over council, and so we need people to be, direct and
Consistent.
accurate
Yes.
with our information.
May I make just a suggestion, since we had our visual representation of the ordinance?
Yeah, that's
And
what
we
it
want
is.
to make sure that that's correct, but I know we've had some rethinking and updates as to how we are gonna work in the future. Is that maybe make a subcommittee or a small group, myself or Mr. Frost maybe can sit in and just to make sure that that is completely up to par with what we're doing, so.
And perhaps the ordinance needs to be revised, because again, this is sort of a literal, visual.
I mean, at one point, we were just talking about one document coming over from PD being a summary. Now we're talking about additional things, body cameras and
Seeing the actual
summaries.
complaint
And
report,
we're actually
yeah.
seeing the whole complaint. We're talking about a lot more documentation than we initially contemplated. So we should make sure that our process mapping is reflective of that.
Madam Chair, I have a question. What's the debate over council? Is that something I missed last time? If it is, then you don't have to fill me in.
No, just the, no, you haven't missed that. That the original, can you hire outside counselor?
Well,
not
the
debate.
ordinance provides for it.
Right,
Huh?
yeah.
I just didn't,
Just
I
that
don't understand
debate. Yeah,
there
no,
was a
no.
debate. All right.
So, we will then move forward and have some meeting and have a conversation with you guys about making sure that the flow chart now accounts for all the many things that we need to see, which is everything that happened regarding
everything.
everything. We want to see dash cam, body cam. We want to see everything
But for-
all the time.
I think that's important though, but for transparency purposes, that way, and then it might also kind of explain to the public as to what the heck is taking so long.
Sure.
If, if we're also pulling all of the video
Right.
and that, if the video is a half an hour long, on average, it's gonna take 3 times as long it takes to redact it,
Right.
so.
And it makes sense for us to revisit that.
Right.
I just want that.
Because realistically, there's a better idea now of what we're asking from everyone.
Sure.
And then we're gonna have to revisit on sort of the bigger picture level, where the resources come from, whether that's in the police department, city attorney's office, to accommodate the requests that we're making that are time consuming.
Well, I'm happy to participate if, the group thinks it's helpful.
Yes,
Feel free to.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's great.
Denise
Thank you.
has access to my calendar.
Yes,
so
I do.
Feel free to schedule.
Thank you.
Okay, are there
Thank
any
you.
other questions that I could possibly be helpful for? Like I said, I'm sorry I don't have much information about what was happening in the beginning, but I can speak to the last 2.
Right, and we are aware of the many transitions and the time periods during which they occurred, so. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, so, old business. Milo police simulated training.
Yes.
A couple of things, one of which Denise has a new date.
Yes. We have a date set for January 14th, which is a Tuesday, at 5:30 p.m., and another session at 7:30 p.m. on the same day.
So it's 5:30 to 7:30 and 7:30 to 9:30?
Correct.
Okay. And this is an opportunity for commissioners to go through a police simulation that is used for a variety of purposes. It is used in the Citizens Academy. It is used sometimes in some situations, not the same situation in which we might find ourselves, for continuing education of police perhaps, but the simulations are used for several things. There has been a question, however, of the usefulness of us going through the simulation training as it is designed currently. So for example, it would be structured kind of similarly to the Citizens Academy, where you have citizens going through scenarios and interacting in an environment as if they were police and getting an idea of the split-second decisions that police have to make when they are in those situations. However, what we are interested in is what police do when they are in those situations. We're not interested in what untrained civilians do when they are in those situations. So it is not very useful to suggest that, that my performance in that, or any of your performance in that environment, is representative of what a police officer would do, because they are highly trained to do so. And so I have some grave concerns about what that might teach us and what it might fail to teach us. And though I understand it can be very fun and entertaining to go through those simulations, I'm not sure how useful it is for us to be able to assess what police do. I had a conversation with Corey Mills, who is designing the simulation for us, and I suggested that to him, that it probably wouldn't be that useful to us to see what we could do. It's great, but it has no bearing on what a police officer would do, because they would not behave the same way we would behave. And there are many ways to explore, examine, assess the decision-making processes of individuals under stress. But probably that isn't one of them, because that's not going to teach us how they would approach that. And he suggested that he could perhaps modify that, or perhaps use some trained officers to go through that simulation. I would not want to suggest that you all should not participate in it, but I do think it's important that we discuss the usefulness of what we might learn as untrained civilians vis-a-vis what it might look like for us to understand what trained police officers go through.
I don't know who all here has done this. I have done it along with some other council members, and I think I and my colleagues all found it very useful. It's an opportunity for the members of this commission to do some role playing, and I know afterwards there was a bit of a debrief and a conversation with the officers at the lab who provided us this opportunity, and it's just you are, as you would be allowed to, again, role play, and you're placed in various scenarios that are real life scenarios. And you are to make judgments on use of force as a civilian, right? And I found it very educational, informative, and I think it's a nice supplement to the other information that was provided us at our meeting with Chief Cox and Officer Mills and the
Deputy
HR
Chief
folks.
Forsberg.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Because they walked us through sort of the use of force protocol, but doing the role play of that, I think it's just more information, more understanding, and I think it
But
was
police are
worthwhile.
trained professionals, and they go through so much training and education, and I do think it's interesting to maybe see what we would do in that situation, but we're not assessing our behavior or civilian behavior. I'm sorry, Jude.
No, it's fine. I was just going to, do you think it's harmful? Because if you don't think it's something that's harmful to do, it may be something that may give some information or give some insight to us about how, say we're reviewing a complaint and we see an officer acted exactly the way we do, that could highlight either a lack of training or lack of experience. I mean, I just wonder from that point of view.
I could, as certainly as a psychologist and certainly as, I could absolutely make an argument that it could skew our decision making. I think if you saw an officer behaving as we would behave in that situation, that would absolutely be problematic. I bet that doesn't happen very much because they have so much training, right? And in that case, probably our interpretation of what we would do in that situation could be harmful because it would be misinformed. But would it be? Can you not overcome that? Can you realize that you're making that assumption and overcome it? Probably we can, as long as we remind ourselves we're not trained professional police officers. Go, David.
So our job is to be free of the bias that we were created to root out if it exists. Because we're an independent, we're like a judge, right? And you're supposed to be as free of bias and your own personal beliefs as possible. So I think the way you frame it, it could be problematic if you're depending on what you expect the outcomes to be. I couldn't imagine anything more valuable for helping us understand what it's like to be in one of those situations than to actually be put in one of those situations. Now, we don't have to, we certainly don't have the training they have, and I don't think anyone on this board is silly enough to project their own, well, I would do this in this situation on the some evaluative process. But there's a huge benefit from walking a mile in someone's shoes that you're about to judge and evaluate. So I think...
I think so, as long as you walk
Okay,
a
can I
mile in their
finish?
shoes, though.
I'd like to finish. Yes, and you can't ever fully be in those shoes, but that's not a reason not to try. And that's what that's what I'm hearing. I think I couldn't disagree more strongly. I think it's a good thing for people to see how people are trained, for people to get some firsthand experience with the protocols that aren't written down, but to become live in some sort of role play scenario. This is how we train professionals to act in medicine, in psychology, in law, and everywhere. I think it's important for us to understand all perspectives. And the only way we start to understand a law enforcement perspective is to start engage in a little bit with what the world looks like to them in these high pressure situations. So I'm all for it.
I think there are many ways to do that, though. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. I think it's very important to understand what they go through. My question is whether this is the best way to do that or not. And Officer Mills, as we talked about it, started rethinking what he had planned and thought maybe there are some better ways to show us what trained police officers are going through, which I think is a bit more relevant for our purposes. There is, the police department has made time available and personnel available for us to engage in this. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, and maybe my point was too subtle. I was suggesting that perhaps we shouldn't do what the Citizens Academy does. I don't think necessarily.
Well, we don't want to
that
get
we
trained.
should do-
Yeah, well, that might be a fair criticism.
And I also will point out one sort of misstatement. It would not be silly, as you review cases in the future, to assume that people would behave as you did in the simulator and to take that information in. It would be human to do that. It is, and we could do journal article by journal article about how that happens not consciously. So I don't think that it would be problematic to do the Citizens Academy, but I do think there might be better uses of our time, better uses of the police's time to perhaps reframe that in terms of getting a better idea of what trained police officers do, not what civilians do. I think it is really important to walk a mile in their shoes. I don't think me doing that as an untrained civilian is walking in their shoes. I would also, I would never have my graduate or undergraduate students do brain surgery on a rat the way I do and ask them to walk a mile in my shoes. They would be highly trained before that would turn over that responsibility to them. I would not think that they would understand what I go through when I do that by having them do that. So I would disagree with you on that point. I don't think doing is necessarily the same as walking in their shoes. I do think it's very important to have some idea of what police are going through. I think there are many ways to do that. And my worry was that as it was currently framed, that this wasn't the best way to do that. Did not make a unilateral decision that we should not do that, would never do that. I thought it would be a productive discussion, though, to talk about what goals might be to get out of that, how that might be helpful, how perhaps we could make it more helpful to our purposes, because our purposes are unique.
The time as stands is not convenient to me because I have another meeting unless that meeting is going to be canceled. The second thing, I went through the Citizens Academy twice, one through the city over here, and one just finished through the Washington County Sheriff Office. And we did the simulations. So if it's going to be a simulation, I think I might be exempt.
No one's forcing you to go.
So, but if through the process you come up with something that is a little bit different than what I went through, I would be fine to
So
to
what is your feeling? You've been through it twice.
Hey,
Do you believe what do you believe you gained from it?
I think it's you don't have enough time to think. You are facing with 4 different scenarios, and what they showed, somebody bringing in like keys, somebody with a phone, somebody with a gun, somebody is lifting his hands or her hands up or down, and you have to really engage them in a way that I made a mistake
Right.
most of the time is somebody was like showing the keys, like going this
And
way.
you shot him.
Yeah, but
was
the other
scared
ones
every
who,
time.
I would say 75% of the time, one would be making a good judgment. But this is like the one area where, you know, is like showing the key in a way that almost like extending his or her hand or arm. And this is the one thing we felt, well, yeah, probably must be a gun.
Right.
So if you did not see a gun, if you are not familiar with all these things and the process of you know, doing this physically, unless you see it, you're not going to really make any good judgment on
Right.
whether or not that is a real threat
Right.
or not. I think it's important to really know these things. I'm not saying that we are at par with what the police officers are doing, but by the same token, police officers are human beings, and somebody might crack. I know they go through lots to make sure that they are safe at all circumstances, but once in a while you get into the situation. So I think I gained quite a bit of that, and the first simulation we had with the Citizen Academy over here is sometimes, you know, somebody has a gun and you shot that person, the person fell on the ground. You don't keep shooting that person, that's it. So it's just your call and how to distinguish between real threat versus not. So again, I think if it's going to be modified in a way that address the concerns, and at different time it will be better. But
That's a date I cannot make. Oh,
So, yeah, so dates, I'm sure we can
Mm-hmm.
revise, because it would be easier for them to do a bunch of us at once, but, okay. Something to ponder, in any case.
If we've got a date question, we can only have 5 at any point. Is it worth, if we can make one of these dates times already established, to let you know? And then
Yes,
we can
if
see
you want
whether
to
or not-
attend.
Because that's got a cap of 5 anyway.
Right.
So
Correct.
if 5 can make it, then that one can
Will
go
you
ahead.
will this get circulated? The invites for these 2 different sessions?
Yes, I can send.
Any other discussion on that point before we move on to, what should be pretty brief? Logo development. So thank you, several of you had input on this. Kim Mortson for the city of Ann Arbor worked on creating a logo, and it's gotten some tweaks thanks to several of you since its first couple of iterations. It's the resolution isn't so fantastic here, but the ring is in sort of a navy blue. There's a blue hand, a
There's a
brown
copy,
hand.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because Denise thinks of everything, we have it in color in front of you. So that may be a better color representation, but there's a blue hand, a black hand, and a brown hand. It has the date that the commission was established, and the name. Even today, there were some suggestions on revision.
The name of the independent commission or name
No,
of
the name will not change, but just, I'm sorry. But perhaps revisions to this. There was one suggestion that the acronym be placed in there.
Right, and I think we talked about just taking the first letter of each word and changing its font.
correct.
Or making it
It's
distinct in
just-
some
it's
way to
distinctive,
show the
yeah.
acronym right. I thought the
Yeah.
acronym in the center was redundant, but the reason why we're mentioning this at all is because you know, you're gonna need the logo in social media if you do business cards, as you mentioned last time. If there is heading on communications outwards, and so this is something that's been in the works for a while and has gone through a few different iterations. So for your consideration, if you have more suggested changes, you could mention them now or not, you can ponder them. we should let Kim know, because she will finalize it and make it into a product that can be used. It's not quite usable as it is now, but she'll do that. So if you have any suggestions, that we can obviously note the one about making the first letter larger on each one, but if you have anything other than that, if you could get that to Denise next week, maybe Tuesday or so, that would be useful, so we can let Kim finish her work and get on with all the other things that she must be working on. Calendar votes.
You also have the updated calendar, and I had an opportunity yesterday because the window was open to add the December date for 2020. You need to vote. If those dates are fine, then I will send that to the city clerk's office and it's added to Legistar for next
Was
year.
that attached to the agenda?
Yeah, it's in there.
It's loose if it helps.
I'd like to move the approval of the 2020 calendar.
Second?
Any discussion?
But I think there's an understanding that probably several of us might miss one or two.
Mhm.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
one I can see
Yeah.
where I'm not here, but
Yeah.
apart from that, they're all good.
Okay.
Call the question. All in favor of these dates?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
New business.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
quick question. This is not in any way a objection to what we've just done, but do all the commissions meet every month?
Most of them that I have dealt with is a monthly basis, unless you want to vote. We would have to vote to change that.
I just wanted to.
Yes.
Typically.
But typically, yes.
Typically, they
They're
do,
once
I
a month.
think, a common month that they might skip is August.
Yeah.
Because no one's here.
Right.
Sometimes December
Just-
too.
Yeah.
Can't get
And-
quorum.
Yeah, we could certainly change that as we get to it. We did skip September this year because
Correct.
of the conference.
Mhm.
Yes.
And I think NACOL is in August next year.
Yep.
Yes, it is.
30th through September 3rd.
Right.
Right. So that should be something that maybe we'll revisit at that point. So in terms of new business, we just wanted to make a note about Officer Alvarez. You all saw the press release from the Ann Arbor Police Department, and we got several questions, and so we just wanted to say that Ann Arbor Police Department is currently investigating this. This has to do with his conduct before he joined the Ann Arbor Police Department, but also not in the city of Ann Arbor. And so we will receive more information as it becomes available from the police department. Questions, comments, thoughts? None? So community liaisons were individuals, the ordinance provides for community liaisons in case would be liaisons between the community and the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission in the event that someone wanted to remain anonymous. They could go to a community liaison and report their concerns, and then that person could relay information to us and make decisions about how much to reveal to us and when. And that would provide a layer of anonymity so that people could come forward in that way. We are hoping to attain several community liaisons. We have a commitment from 2 Ann Arbor residents at this time. Help me, Mashad. Is it Reverend Dr. Stephen Daniels?
Reverend Doctor.
Reverend Doctor, he has a PhD as well, from Second Baptist Church, has agreed to serve as a community liaison starting in January. Clarissa Love from the University of Michigan Office of in the medical school has also agreed to serve. And so we're certainly looking for more, and we know we have several board members who are seeking out people who might serve in that capacity, but just to let the public know that we'll have at least 2 community liaisons in December who are available for anonymous complaints, and we expect to have more shortly.
In December.
Yes.
So how do we apply?
So, we don't have an application process.
No.
We don't.
And there's not one prescribed in the, it just says the commission may.
Yeah. So,
So whatever you want.
we don't have a specific application process. What we're gonna do is, so that doesn't answer your question. We don't have a specific application process.
Just for a point of reference, this was an item that was like widely criticized by organizers and members of the task force, in part because there was no process attached to it. It was a late addition by the mayor and some of his supporters. And it seems strange that folks with no like transparent connection to the oversight board, with no approval, with no public access, would then somehow have access to some of the most vulnerable reports, and then how would it work? So it was a last minute add-on either by Warpahouse Ackerman or the mayor, and it was unclear totally to the public how it was gonna work all the time.
Yeah. And so not that they would have access to documents, but they would come forward and interact with us in lieu of the person doing so themselves.
Sure, but just so you're all aware that when this came up, when the
Madam Chair,
was passed.
parliamentary procedure, just how do we work
Yes.
in the context of, I know there's a point in time for public comment.
That is true.
I just wanted
Right.
to understand how we.
Thank you.
And no call and response even in that.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we will have public comment again at the end, and we'd be happy to hear that comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, they're not grassroots people. I know I'm not supposed to say anything, but they haven't helped in anything else. So I find it interesting that those are the two. We, the grassroots, don't know how to do it, or how to contact you. Just want you to know that as point of reference.
All right, so that was just a report on the progress thus far, and we still have more to do, and there is no prescribed number of community liaisons that can exist. Further, we understand that if anyone would like to bring an anonymous complaint, they can also do so using someone other than that person as well, anonymously.
We've had one like that already,
Yes,
right?
and we have had anonymous complaints already where a third party brings them forward, and so that is always allowed as well. But just an update on that.
Madam Chair, and to respect those who are in the room, who have worked so hard to bring this about, can we formalize it in the context of this commission? Maybe there is a commissioner who works to develop some, I don't want to use the term policies and procedures, but metrics. If this is something that we have decided to embrace in the context of this commission, how then do we honor the work that has already been done and bring integrity to the process as far as transparency and accountability to make that work well? And I'm willing to volunteer to serve in that capacity to find out ways in which we can wrap our hands around it. If this is going to be a viable part of this commission and we're going to have liaisons, I'm willing to
And I
put
do
my
think
skin in the
that
game.
From various groups that I've been speaking with, this is an important thing, this liaison person who can come forward and bring this information while the complainant, so to speak, is given the opportunity to remain anonymous. So I think that we should do that.
And if I could share personally, in some aspects, coming onto the commission, I thought I would be, in some ways, a community liaison. And then I know we are cooking and eating at the same time, so we're building this. But if that's something that the commission has embraced and a vision forward, I would like to help and to add, to build that bridge to make this a viable portion of this commission.
I have a question, like, let's say any person who is sitting there, come and say, a person in the community came and don't want to come to the commission or come to the police and they have this complaint. Would we accept it or not? We will accept it, although these are not assigned.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
We already have.
Denise takes them on the phone.
Yes, so although somebody is not assigned,
Right.
somebody can bring on behalf of somebody else a complaint.
Always.
So that should be clear because it doesn't exclude other people from bringing complaints, right?
But it would be, I agree that it would be really important to think about what the process is of people
Right.
whom we're making available to the
Right.
community and saying, here are these people, and we should at the same time say, by no means is anyone limited to using these people, but the process by which those people are selected, there should be a process, and there should be some, the process should be transparent, there shouldn't be any reason not to, and I think that would, require some work and some thought, and so it would be wonderful to do that, and to have you, and so, we can establish a subcommittee, and figure out who might be willing to work in that
No, it's
capacity as
good to
well.
have a license, I'm not saying it shouldn't,
Yeah.
but these license, I just want to make it clear, the fact that we have license does not exclude
Correct.
any
And we have already
citizen
taken anonymous
to come
complaints
to
from
come and
people,
do that.
yes.
And I think, I'm
But
just
still.
looking at our webpage right now, and it says if you would like to file a complaint. I wonder if we could just wordsmith that a little, if you would like to file a complaint on behalf of yourself or anonymously on behalf of a third part or someone
Yeah.
like that, just kind of add to that to let people know when they go on here, they can complete this form for someone else.
And we could do that
Yeah.
quickly.
Quickly,
easily.
yeah.
Next, any further discussion on that? And the next piece was from the Ann Arbor Police Department, who provided us with a comprehensive list of complaints and their status. And so you each have that in your packet.
The yellow ones we have received.
The yellow ones that are highlighted in yellow are ones that have been received by the commission. The others have not yet been received by the commission, but the police have resolved most of them, and they still have some pending. So the disposition column reflects the status with the police department, not the status with the Oversight Commission. And this way, we can make sure that we are, obviously Denise has been keeping track of them. There was no point at which they were not being kept track of. But for everyone to have a visual of where we are with them.
So
Commissioner Tadoro Hargreaves.
I guess my immediate thought is going back to the process. And so it does seem like we have a few on here, especially the most recent ones where it does say exonerated, that we have not seen. And we have been told there's nothing in line to come to us. So my initial question is there a reason for that? What's missing here?
So yellow is what we have.
Right.
And so we have not yet received 07.
So we have
9
received,
forward. So we have 4, 6. Are there 2 6s?
seems like we
The
have
no
received.
complaint filed after July 12th of this summer has been forwarded to us. Is that correct?
Looks about right.
If it's in yellow.
I'm little bit, I would like to, are these all complaints that the police have forwarded to us? Or
No.
just the
No.
yellow?
No.
The yes
Are
to
there
yellow.
1, 2, 3, so we have only
6 and
4?
6.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, 5 and
No.
6, I'm sorry.
I don't-
So 4, 5, 6,
6,
and
yeah.
8 we have.
Correct.
Are you talking about
Yeah.
number, not saying
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Yes.
Total it, yes,
The
I got
numbers,
that.
yes.
So these
In
are
lieu
the
of the
only
name.
4 we have.
Yep.
And some have been reviewed of these 4.
Right, we
I-
have.
Well, also, Jude, you were there, I think Ali was, I'm just picking out like 06, no, sorry, 05. We discussed that one. A long time ago.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
as-
was-
As
I-
our subcommittee.
Yeah, I
think
was there.
The ones that have all come to us we've reviewed and are through, I
And those
believe.
again are the ones that are highlighted?
Right. So my question goes more towards what's in line to come to us.
So wait, does that, so just point of information, does that mean we don't have any active complaints under review? We don't have anything in our bucket for review that's ongoing at the moment?
Yes, we do. We have one
Yes.
right here. I mean, and I don't see it there.
What number?
Is it 04?
Yours is 04.
It's 04, I think, to which you're referring.
What does
Yeah.
exonerated mean?
That's the, police have found that,
How does it differ from unfounded?
would you like to speak to
Whatever.
that, Deputy Police Chief Forsberg?
Unfounded means that it did not occur. Exonerated means that if they, whatever.
Something happened, but
I mean,
but
it's
there's
really
nothing
for delivery.
reasonable.
In the whole case, I
Fair
know
enough.
it
No,
doesn't
that makes
mention
sense.
cocaine.
What is exonerated times 2 means? Just both
Two
officers?
officers.
Okay.
It would seem like it would be, is this our document? Or
This
some-
is from the police department, so that
police
column,
center.
the disposition column is the police determination, not
No,
ours.
I think at some point it would be nice for us to be able to get an e-copy of this and then work our own column on the end that shows where it is in our process, right? So we kind of have it all in one place and can see.
And
what-
that exists.
Oh, it does?
Yes.
Awesome.
So this form will be revised then to add that column?
Yeah, it exists already, it's just not
It's a different
printed out for us.
I don't
Denise has
have all of these complaints
Right.
are not with
I
me.
think that's,
So to show them to you all, we're showing you where the
Uh-huh.
police are.
So
with
there,
this.
there are 8 that aren't highlighted, so are those there
Those
to
are
be-
ones where we have not gotten them
we
yet.
physically do not have that.
And if
Right.
the police
And
have
it's
some,
because redactions are.
that's the question.
That's the question.
That
Well,
we
they have
want-
to do their own investigation.
It's
Well,
done.
where they said exonerated
Oh,
or
it's-
sustained,
Oh.
or, that means that
That
they've
means it's
finished.
done.
So they've exonerated, for
So
example,
that-
number 7.
If it's exonerated, it's in the city attorney's office, is that
Well,
what
no,
you're
because
saying?
Ari said she doesn't have any.
So the question will be investigating where is that? Where is the
Right.
black
Yeah.
hole?
I think we could also use a disposition date, right? Disposition and date of, so then we know what the time is
Right.
between.
Well, ideally, we should get that, we would get that
I mean, what's the-
report, that dispensation report.
And there's a
from us.
timeline for that in the ordinance.
Exactly. That,
What-
this is why I go back to my
Summary
initial question to
recommendations.
the
What provision
attorney's
is that?
office. They have a document with a flow chart, and yet we're not getting anything from them.
Well, the flow chart doesn't control, I'm trying to find it in the ordinance language, right? The flow chart is hopefully derivative of that.
I believe I remember a conversation with Deputy Chief Forsberg about, and there are specifications for the timeline for the police to do their work.
30 days unless there's ongoing.
Correct. And I remember some discussion with the city attorney's office, but I am not sure that the ordinance specifies how long they get to take and that there is any binding length of time for them.
Well, there are some, I mean, I'm looking, so,
Good section, I got it too.
God, there's some big, long sections. 1.215, Section 5, report by the police chief. Upon the closure of an internal investigation, so they can take as long as they want with it, and that's
The
appropriate.
police are always within their time frame.
Right. They have to, once they're done, they have to make a report within 30 days of them being done that says, here's what happened, unless if there's ongoing disciplinary stuff or criminal proceedings that preclude that, right? And then they've got 14 days from the end of those things.
Right, so we're all clear on what the police have to do and when.
Yeah. So I guess I mean, they're
It
in
seems
the
as
room.
if you're coming back to the point we made earlier that the
Where is
timeline
it?
issues are with the city attorney's office.
Because they're now getting, with the redactions and the rest to get it out and putting together the relevant policies.
I have another.
Excuse me.
I
Since
apologize.
I was gonna say, since the chief and deputy chief are in the room, if there's no objection from the committee, it's the normal Robert's Rules way of allowing people from the public to speak during a meeting. Could we have them respond to this question about the 30 days, the 14 days, and then if you're, just to get further clarification?
I'm not sure we need that.
'Cause
I think we're
we
really
know
clear and
it's
they're
met.
clear and
Their
they're
stuff is
fine.
done.
we're
Right.
fine.
But we don't have dates on.
But we
But
would
that's not
get
a
the
question they
date.
can answer from the chair at this, if we want dates of these, for the ones that we have, we can, look at the dates of disposition on those. So all the ones that are highlighted in yellow, we have that information, it's just not on this form for you to look at
Right.
now. Denise has that. On the ones that we don't have, that date will appear because they have finished and they have sent their information to the city attorney's office.
And they have 30 days, the city attorney's office then will then have a full 30 days to do the work that we heard about, which seems like more than enough.
The city attorney's office has 30 days according to,
Once the again, back to the language, once the good chief makes, and the police department make a decision, the city then has to produce everything to us within 30 days. And if that includes a run through the city attorney's office.
I'm sorry, can you point that out in the ordinance?
I think-
The police have 30 days. There is no specification, to my knowledge, and I could have missed it, about what happens after they meet their timeline. And this is a problem, that there is no specification.
Well, they have to make a report to us.
Correct.
They whom?
The police department.
Correct.
Within 30 days.
And they have been doing
And-
that.
Right, and they, as far as we know, it has, but that report has to go to the attorney's office to be redacted.
Based on processes,
Well, I don't understand what the reading of the statute that would make that a separate process from them issuing.
because the city attorney's office is not the police. It
No,
is
but
not
they're-
the city that
no,
has
they're
30
the-
days, it
they're
is
the-
the police department.
Yeah, I hear you, but it feels semantics. They're
I don't think that's semantic. I mean,
They're
now,
the
now, like I said,
attorneys
I
for the
want 30
police.
days for everybody to
Yeah,
be
they're,
finished.
look, they're
Don't
the
get me wrong.
attorneys for the police. If the police need attorney help to produce these documents, so be it. But
Now-
it's still the entity that's producing it.
Now that's semantics, because they're really clear that the city attorney's office is different from the police have 30 days. If what you're saying is the city attorney's office is the police and it is the city and everyone's the city and they all get 30
No,
days,
it's
that's
not what I'm
fine,
saying. What
but
I'm
that's not how the ordinance was written.
No. What I'm saying is, a fair reading of the ordinance is the police have to produce this. If the police, before they can give it to us, need to check with their attorneys, that doesn't add more time. That's within the 30-day window.
That's one way to read it.
Right.
That's
No,
one way to read
That's
it.
I
right.
think that,
I'm not sure if the
Wanna
police are
read it?
checking with their attorneys or if the city has decided that we cannot see it until the city attorneys go over it with a fine tooth comb.
So that's
and
more-
the
right.
police
Right.
are not making that decision, and that seems to be the more accurate interpretation of that. There are different ways to read it for sure, but I'm not
Right.
sure the city is saying, oh, the police are saying, oh well, I need my attorneys to look over it first. The police are ready to give it over. However, the powers that be in the city have decided that we, for whatever reason, don't get to see it in that form, and this is the problem. That is the crux of the problem, not the police.
Well, I'm not blaming anybody.
I know you are
Right,
not.
I'm not blaming us. I don't.
you're interpreting the
I-
ordinance.
You
I'm
have read
interpreting-
it differently.
Well, I'm reading the plain
No,
reading
just
of
reading
it,
the
right?
You're reading a read. I'm not sure yours is more plain.
All right, let it go.
You
I
or
mean,
me.
Just that. It's
reading
silly.
the
Let it go.
ordinance.
So
He's not interpreting,
okay,
he's reading the
so-
I'm
ordinance.
reading
you're
the
coming down-
ordinance.
So at what
The
point
ordinance
then-
mentions the police department.
so
And I don't understand your position,
Well, this
particularly
is-
given your obligations to this commission.
But this
I'm
is-
sorry, I would like the reports as quickly as possible.
Right.
I believe that there's a gap in the ordinance that was created not by us. There is a gap that does not have a timeline for what happens after the police meet their obligations.
And what I'm suggesting is that reading, that the police have met their obligations when they put the last period on the thing and hit print, is against the plain reading of the thing here in the way. But and contrary to the interest of this commission. But if that's the reading you want to go with, that's fine.
So I have a question then. So we talked about going and having a meeting with Ari and the attorney's office. So when we go and have this meeting with them now, do we now inform the attorney's office that if the police department gets done their report in 25 days, you have 5 days to get all
No.
redactions to our desk?
No, that's not the reading. They have to, once they make a decision on the complaint,
Right,
exonerated, unfounded,
Right.
whatever, they have then 30 days to put all this stuff up
right.
and send it to us. It seems like one of the requirements by the city on one of its departments is before you can send that, you have to run this through another department. It's still the police's obligation to produce it within that 30-day timeline. I don't see the time, I don't,
Right. So I
I don't
think
see the
what-
canon of statutory construction that permits this alternate
So I
reading of
think
it.
that there are two separate ways to read this, and I think we're being informed that the attorney's office is reading it one way.
Mhm.
And as we're hearing now, we're reading it another way. Because it's clear that there are reports in here, that, you know, if these were taken care of, this one came in August 8th. If that was taken care of by September 30th, their 30 days are up, and we don't have it,
Mhm.
okay?
Yeah,
So
unless you buy into
that's
this alternate reading
raising-
that the
right.
city attorney's office can take as long
As long
as
as
it
it,
wants.
right. So I think that this goes
There's nowhere
back
to be
to
found in
the
the
group
ordinance.
that has to
No,
meet
it's not.
with Ari, or the attorney's office.
It's not. It
And maybe we should ask, maybe we should have a clarification such that we can determine whether 30 days includes all processing before it gets to us, or whether that is just the police. If it takes them 29 days and the city attorney's office gets 1 day, I'm thrilled with that. I'd like to have everything in 30 days. The faster the better. And so perhaps we just need some clarification. I think this is not the first, my perception of the first gap in the ordinance that could be improved upon. But I think there is sufficient lack of clarification there in terms of how one reads it. I think there's probably more than one reasonable and plain way to read it, but it would be good to get some clarification. I'm sorry, Commissioner Othman.
I think one of the issues that we had, and the attorney had mentioned, is the human resources.
Right.
So if you know, if they don't have the human resources to go over the reports,
Mhm.
and it's going to take them 2-3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever number of weeks, can we live with that? If we don't live with that, this means that the city council has to provide the
Right,
human
right.
resources
Yes, that's
to
right.
support
Right.
us.
Right.
not our
Correct.
problem.
It's
And-
not, it's
and-
not.
And what we can say within 2 weeks of the report that comes out of the police department or the chief of the police, we need, as
Mhm.
commissioners, to have the report available
Right.
for us.
No, I absolutely agree with that,
Yeah,
and
Unless we do that, we are churning water. It's not going to churn
You're right.
to anything. It's just
And two, what makes me nervous is that the attorney sat with us earlier and said she has no knowledge of any, yet there's 8 right here. And even if you, 9, right, even if you were to say these were all taken care of 2 days ago, they're still technically in their 30-day period, right? So Denise should know where they are. She should know that, you know, 07's gonna take 2 weeks to redact, or something like that. Just some kind of status, so that we know where we are as a group and what's coming down the pipeline to us
Yeah.
to review.
And that was one of the issues I raised way back, is on the website for this commissioner. Each of these reports has some kind of timeline that we know exactly, almost
Yes.
like you are following where the bus
Yep,
is.
says, yep,
Well, I think
So-
that was the intention of
That
these
was-
provisions that we're
And-
reading, but
Yeah.
but
So
they're,
what we need to do, we need to translate that, these words into action. And if we don't do that, if we don't have the support, this means that we are really
you're right.
hamstring ourselves.
yep.
I mean, some of this stuff
Absolutely.
we probably could have gotten, some materials, a FOIA request, you've got 10 days and then a 5 or 10 day extension.
Yeah.
Right, almost be faster. None of this is criticism. It just feels like it's a bumpy road that we're trying to smooth out and navigate. We
Right.
got to get some processes in
This is-
place
yeah.
because there's a whole bunch of work out there that we're not looking at. There's statute of limitations for a reason. Memory fades, people's
Yep.
interest fades. I mean, there's a lot of things that compel you to move quickly on these kind of things. I think the SOL on these is 2 years, right? So we got to fish and cut bait.
Yeah.
So whatever we
Right.
can do in a cooperative manner to get these things on our desk, the better for us and what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
We owe it to the community. Really,
Yeah,
we owe-
absolutely.
No further discussion?
So, how do you wanna go about putting together the group that's gonna meet with the attorney's office? Do you want time to think about that?
Yes, but I could do so quickly. I also think it's going to be important to perhaps ask some questions of the city attorney, ask some questions of counsel. And I think it's very important to meet with Ari to figure out where we are vis-a-vis what the police have provided
Right.
relative to what we have. But I also think that we probably need to. It's very clear that there are several agencies who have additional work to do because we exist.
Yeah.
And that is an issue that impacts our work that needs to be resolved at the level of council, et cetera. And that is something that we need to address as well. So we were put into place without the support to do our work. I'm sure no one wanted to disable us from doing work, but that is what has happened, in fact. So I think we need to do that as well. So I could take a minute and converse with you all about how to work with the city attorney's office on that level and with city council on the other. We should probably move on because one of our biggest pieces is the budget committee report on which they have been working really hard. There's a draft for your consideration, which is not anywhere close to final, but there is a little bit of a timetable on this as well, in that city council has a calendar and a timetable for when they're considering budgets, etc. So,
Just a segue, actually, that's possibly one thing that could come out of the last discussion is perhaps there needs to be a bigger line item for administrative costs in here to reflect the funding provision staff to be able to things like that.
Is it in the packet?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was all in the packet. Sorry, it's in, stupid tiny font. I was looking at it on a computer, and it's when I see it out like this, it is much smaller. This is, as the chair was saying, this is definitely a draft. We put out to get information back from everybody. We got some, definitely didn't hear from everyone, but at this point we're still trying to build this as sort of, in the broad sense and be inclusive with it. Of course, there is a huge amount of guesswork this year because we don't have anything historical to come from. So that's why this is put in here. And my approach always with budgets is until I have to start cutting it back, keep putting everything in. Right? So that's where this is currently at. Like I say, it was basically pieced together from the different feedback that we got. It's also a couple of us have met with Tom Crawford, from the city, Chief Financial Officer, and he helped us with the format a bit. Or he actually sent us an email saying these are all the different things to consider. If you get all of these in, then you're hitting a gold standard. So I think we've pretty well done that. There's still some more stuff to flesh out with it, but this also we did it in a template so that it can hopefully be sort of action plan oriented as well, which is why we're trying to include specific measures of success, like hard measurable numbers wherever we can have them, and we're also going to want to, when it's final, have a sort of champion or a leader for each particular line item who's going to be the person driving that work forward throughout the year.
It looks like,
Great.
yeah, it reflects a lot of work, good work, thank you. And, I'll just say this year's budget was $150,000. This was more, so by 20,000 increase. So you said you don't, and I understand it's have much, history to base these recommendations on. Will we have when do you think we'll have a sense of how much we have spent? What our expenditures have been?
I can send you that. I
Okay.
can send the commission.
Yeah, because I don't know if obviously we're not going to spend more than 150,000, but that would be helpful guidance. Also, I would just say, I'll be frank, one line item that jumps off is, for travel, seems quite generous. Training and travel, 40,000 plus.
Where's the other 20?
Yeah, council members get 500 each
Yeah.
annually. That's a lot. I think this is,
I'm not, admittedly, I didn't attend the NACL conference. I don't think I'd support either of those budget items until I saw comparable budget items and appropriate in other commissions.
this is the only commission that has a.
Well, no, in other oversight
means other
commissions.
oversight.
I'm not
Oh.
sure, so that's $40,000 that, based on my earlier investigation, we could get some serious hands-on training in-house here for commissioners in a way that could revolve year after year. I mean, those jumped off. Those jumped.
Sorry, where are you seeing the 40,000?
I'm seeing 20, I'm seeing 20 for NACL and
regional,
20 for another
another 20.
regional training.
Yeah, and that regional training has not been established what it is. Like I say, these are guesstimates and broad numbers that we just wanted to
Right.
start out with. That isn't saying that that's necessarily NACL, that's other you were just saying, we can get great training for that
Yeah,
could
For,
be
for,
this
for
training.
that, right,
Right.
for, we could probably get it
Yeah,
for 20, I
50.
mean, there's only 15 of us in the room, right? Every couple of years, you could do it, so I spent a lot of time reading about the amount of training police commission, oversight commissions get all over the country. Now, some places, it's crazy, the ordinance requires you to go in service for 2 weeks, right? And it's more, and it's a paid position in the rest. But, so it's all over the map. The training us seems like most important. So if the idea is to train, spending 20 to go to a conference seems a little gratuitous.
I would add that in-house training would be very valuable. However, I would suggest that it is not a substitute for the training that the National Civilian Oversight Organization can provide, nor is there a substitute for interacting with other civilian oversight agencies across the country. That cannot be produced in-house, that can't be replicated, it can't be substituted for in-house.
So NACL
We
doesn't.
have done, I'm sorry,
Nick-
in your absence, we were able to do lots of reading as well.
Mhm.
We actually have access to some of the other budgets, and we have done lots of reading about training and how other oversight agencies train. We have, because of connections we've made, been able to converse with other agencies and talk about their training and how they do that. Obviously, very different budget structures across the board, from a certain percentage of the police budget to budgets by city council. And so we've been able to do lots of that reading and learning
So
in the
can you
past few
produce
months.
some examples of other commissions spending this, similarly situated, spending this kind of money?
Sure.
We have been talking about training this commission for
Mhm.
almost a year, okay?
Yeah.
And by not training the commission, because this is too expensive and we couldn't find somebody, you did a lot of research and,
Well, I could
and-
find someone for $40,000. I couldn't find someone for free. I would also point out that
I'm not-
NACL doesn't
there
provide
is some-
training.
Can I
Just let
finish,
her
please?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. There is something in between spending $40,000 and spending $0, number one. Number two, this commission will not do their job if they don't know how to do their job, okay? We are picked, we are civilian, we have different background, and the longer it takes for us not to be trained, we were promised when I joined that they will be training so you know how to do your job. A year passed by, I have not.
Right.
None of us have received this. If we receive training, spend the first year $40,000, maybe next year we don't need to spend that kind of money. This is the only training we got that few of us went to this conference. That's about it. We are reading on our own, we don't know what we're doing. And if you want a dysfunctional commission, that's fine. But if with this commission to be functional, we really, in my opinion, training this commission how to do their job by any means necessary is become critical. If you spend that kind of money first year, you're not going to spend it every year. It's not necessarily that every single year, but you have to make an initial investment. When you bring 11 people who have absolutely no background, you're an attorney, maybe you have some background, but none of us does. And in the first year, next year, we might not need that kind of money. But to keep putting it off and just like to me is like,
But also, we save so much money because we get to consult with people who are happy to consult with us because we met them.
Right.
And we
Yeah.
talked about
Right.
our commission,
Right.
So,
and there are people across the country who are pulling for us, and there are commissioners, and there are attorneys, and there are judges who are happy to answer our questions pro bono, who are happy to consult with us because of the connections that we made and because they understand our story in a way that they would not had we not attended.
So,
So
a
we
couple,
may save some money. Who knows?
a few points. One, you're going to need it every year because people will term out, right? So you're going to have new commissioners that you're going to have to train, and maybe we just send new people every year. I don't doubt the networking point. Ultimately, we could spend $150,000 on every person in this room, and they still wouldn't be qualified to do the kind of investigations we're talking about, right? Because this is highly specialized stuff. There's only a couple of dozen lawyers in the county who do this kind of work. So if you're gonna put money anywhere, it's not to us networking and learning a little bit about police investigations. It's about, like what most congressional committees do, and most governments do, is you hire someone competent to look at the stuff and provide you advice. And we seem to be saying, no, I can teach someone who's never done any of this to do this for $2,000 a year, and then they'll be qualified to do that. And
I don't know why, I mean,
think
you're
that's-
putting words
I think
in
you
people's
misunderstood
mouth. I think we
Well-
are saying this. Who said I don't want to deal with the council and want to learn everything and I want to be the best in the country? We're not saying that. We're saying there's basic training that this commission need to go through.
Yes, that's right.
Commissioner Walton.
I just wanted to point out as well, the, beyond the administrative costs, that we have, the fixed non-negotiable, the single biggest line item in here is for outside legal counsel.
Yes, no, I get that.
So I just want to say,
No,
there is a balance, it
there
isn't
is.
the case that we're
I-
trying to do it all
I get
ourselves and
that.
that we don't acknowledge. I also think that there's multiple different, there's not necessarily just a sole and single purpose for this commission. There's the whole community outreach side and things like that. So some of this training and learning could be very well spent, and I would certainly advocate for some of that being not just the investigation side, but the also connecting with the community, learning different ways of doing that. Maybe some of this is training or support for
Yeah.
community liaisons that we've really talked about. So I think, it's very, at this point in particular, this is very intentionally generic in this.
Mhm.
So I just want to kind of call out those
Yeah,
aspects.
I just think it's a little obscene to spend $25,000 for public commission members representing this constituency to go to Austin, to go to a conference in
Tucson,
Network.
Arizona.
So noted. We should probably.
airfare. Right.
At the end, I'll give you
Mhm.
some hand. I don't
Oh,
know if you're trying-
thank you. No.
Because
we should probably make this our last comment.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak. And when you talk about budget, you got two of the biggest financial hawks sitting here when it comes to people on city council. And when we looked at this was something that jumped out right to me right away. And I understand Commissioner Amiri's concerns about training and lack of support. And we are hearing you. And as we go to negotiate with others when it comes to the budget soon, we got a budget retreat coming up. It's going to be really hard for us to lobby for this money if it's going to be spent like this. For me, I will just say that right now. I support Commissioner Santa Croce's approach. I think we need to have in-house expertise that's residual, that's here, that's institutional, and that's not just one-offs, because there will be constant turnover, be constant change, and we need to have the institutional knowledge in-house to train people that need it constantly. And for me, city council member, voting on a budget, I would not support this. I will support other parts of it, but to do this regional training, and I appreciate the work that went into this, Commissioner Jude, this is not easy. I appreciate the detail and the time that you took to do this, and this is not a criticism of what was presented. But just to let you know that I have no problem with spending up to $300,000 a year if this commission needed it, if it was a serious situation on our hands. But we want a return on investment. And I don't think we're gonna get a return on our investment with these conferences, the way they're spelled out. I appreciate, again, what they can provide. We have a limited resource, and this commission is the only one with a budget. And you fail to realize that. I mean, this, we have a lot of aspirations in our city. The reality is, you gotta cash those checks. And so, just know that we're not gonna be writing checks that we can't cash. And so, I'll just leave it at that. As we go to work on this budget more, just know where city council's position is on this.
Madam Chair, I don't think at any point in time we failed to realize that this is the only commission with a budget.
Thank you.
I don't think there was any point or misconception that, oh, this is money, just put in whatever you want or whatever you think. I think this is the first time for all of us around the table. This is the first time that some of us have had the opportunity to look at the budget. And so as it reads in the water print draft, that is the type of information that was not, and I appreciate what you shared, but it's not a failure of realization. And when you talk about the NACOL conference itself, it's not about people wanting to fly off to Tucson, Arizona for training. I think it's about our desire to know more of how to build a system. And once the house is built, and once the things are established within, then those who come after us will have a much easier kind of row to hoe because it will have been put in place. And so I appreciate the comments, but I don't think it's a failure to realize that we are the only commission that has a budget. This is a draft of a first time of a commission of people who are coming together to do the best we can with the information we have.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I don't have any objection for a one-off. If we want to go to kind of learn specific things, well, then it makes sense, or to send a few delegates. But the idea that this is kind of going to be a methodology, what I heard is for training long-term.
Commissioner Santa Croce, we should probably.
Yeah, that's all I had to
Thank
say.
you.
Thank you.
Can I, before we close it, can I just say,
Yes.
it's still open? I would love to hear from more people.
So
Call
if
me,
you haven't
can email
contributed
me,
yet,
either myself or Commissioner Evans. Please do. I mean,
Yeah.
if we're gonna build something good that everyone is gonna be able to get behind, then we've got to keep hearing from people.
and I think we do appreciate the hawkish view because it helps us with our first budget, and so we'll be relying on you guys to help give us the kind of feedback that you did today. So that's very useful to us in many ways as we build it going forward. I'm sorry.
I just want to remind before we end our meeting that the policy agenda suggestions from the commission is due on December 16th, and that's before we meet again. So if I could possibly have.
And so for
one
those
to
of
do
you
that.
who, right, so I think it's important, now that you have the budget, you can critique it in more detail. If you didn't contribute to the formation of it, make sure you do so. They have a lot of work to do in a short period of time.
Two things. Budget one, again, thank you. I know it reflects a lot of thought and effort on your part, which is appreciated. You met with Tom Crawford, that's also great. I also do very much appreciate the comments made by Councilmember Amwali and David. And I will just say that, why I called out my initial reaction to the second page and the money that's allocated here for training. I do also agree with the recommendations that were made about developing this expertise in-house. And I think about it like how council members are trained, and we have orientation and staff, orients us. Now I realize, we're more independent, but that sort of expertise is developed in-house over time. And, honestly, when I see, that and I don't want to get into the line item detail, but it does jump off the page because this is public's money. And, $21,000 basically for 10 commissioners to go to Tucson, Arizona for a conference. That just, that sounds like a bit of a boondoggle, so I'll just put that out there with that caveat. And then, so I do think that, and I appreciate the opportunity to communicate with you directly, and I will do that as well, and I'll copy everyone about some of these budget recommendations. And then on the policy agenda before this meeting tonight, I'm on the policy agenda, I'm the council rep, one of the council reps on the policy agenda committee. And tonight we heard from, we got the recommendations from the Transportation Commission representative, at which point I informed the other members of the policy agenda committee that I had an ICPOC meeting afterwards, and that they would be getting the recommendations for the policy agenda committee. But we are not meeting, the policy agenda committee is not meeting in December, because we would be meeting on Christmas Eve. We're not meeting, so we're meeting in January. So you do not need to get any recommendations to us until January. Our next meeting, sorry?
Do you have a date by which
The
you'd like
date?
them, not your meeting, but when you'd like them?
I'd say like the second week in January, if you can do it, if you can pull it together. I can give you a sample. The Transportation Commission had, about 10 maybe recommendations for us to consider as policy recommendations. So
Perfect.
look at my calendar and see when we're next.
Would you send them to Denise?
Yes,
so that she
please.
can send them out? The sample, and I think we have some exemplars too. Anan, not to put that much pressure on you, are you doing outreach committee report? Do we have
Yeah,
one?
I can. I mean, I don't know what, we had a meeting. I don't have a report because I thought Andrew will be here and will be bringing a report. We had a meeting at the Bryan Community Center, and I forgot the date. I can look at my calendar.
November 7th?
November 7th. And I'm sorry for the confusion that happened. We announced the date, we made a flyer, we sent it out. Then last minute they told us they cannot do it, and they suggested a different date, and we went with it. However, we had a good turnout in terms of the number of the people that came to it was much more better than our first meeting, and there were clearly a very clear interest in the commission. People didn't know about it, so they had no idea that we existed. So that was welcomed by people. We heard some people from the community complained about, being treated as African American. Have not, that one person really gave a lot of examples of himself and other people, how they are not really treated fairly by the police, and we explained to them the process of the complaint. So, and we allowed pretty much every person to take time to express themselves. So we explained to them what the commission, what's our mission, what's our value, why we exist, and how long we've been here. And from the commission, there were three. Denise was there also. Muhammad, Lisa, myself. You were there?
No.
No, in the first
No, I
meeting.
couldn't
You were
make
first
that one.
meeting.
Yep.
There was somebody else. The Andrew was there. So there were five of us there. And maybe there were 15 members of the community were there. And I thought the meeting was very, very positive in the sense that, number one, that people learn about us. Number two is that we heard from the people what is their concern and how they would like to see the policing in their community. And the third thing is that we met some interesting students from the law school at the University of Michigan. 3 of them were students, and they were very interested. And one of them, we thought, Lisa and I talked on the side after the meeting. One of them might be a good candidate for, the youth member. That the commission always should have a youth member. So she's in law, she knows, and she's very interested. I don't know, we have talked to her at all, but it was a thought, And because we have one youth person, we have not talked to her.
When we approved the composition of this committee, we designated one as a
Yes,
youth
because
representative.
they have only 1 year, so what's her name will be done soon.
Right.
So we have not talked to her. We just she just caught. Let me put it that way. She caught our attention. She's very bright, very, and Lisa and I said, well, maybe that's keep it in mind when it's time.
She's a
What?
public defender.
Yeah, maybe when time comes, we can reach out to her
But
or to have
Fill
her
out an
apply.
application.
Yeah, have her
But the
apply.
one-year appointment isn't terminal, right? We just staggered 1 and 2 year appointments.
No, that
that
appointment
is-
is
no.
The
1
youth
year.
is terminal,
Yes.
Youth is 1 year,
period.
period.
Yeah, because the law student will only have a shelf life of 3 years anyway.
Yeah, because they will move, we don't know when they graduate,
Yeah.
where they're gonna go, so it would be a good place for 1 year, because they're moved, moment. And that's about basically the meeting, and, we'd like to have something a little bit more, like, we don't still have a brochure to leave there for the people, but the brochure we produced, like to have it produced in quantity, that we do, and also it'd be useful for us to have that brochure and maybe a business card.
Yes.
It's like, for example, we were thinking of going to go to the Jewish Family Services. They deal with a lot of refugees, and that one community would like to reach. But if we go to them, we don't have a business card, we don't have a brochure, and that, would be useful if it was produced. And when we go to the meeting, we distribute, like you go to the Jewish community and say, we'd like to meet with your constituency, here who I am, have a business card, this is our brochures, it talk about our mission, our values, and they can have them when they talk to people to come to the meeting, they can hand them something concrete.
Yes.
So that will be very helpful for the future.
Thank you. Public comment. More public comments?
8:11.
I know.
So I have a couple
Timer.
follow-up questions related to items that were discussed tonight. Commissioner Evans, I want to say that I heard your point about interruptions, and I just wanted to make people aware that there were a number of applicants for the Oversight Board who had been members of the task force, and they were actually kind of dismissed and denied access by 2 of the city council members here, and other members of the community were chosen over them. Commissioner Santaroche and Francis Todoro Hargreaves, I think that you were actually the personal candidates of the mayor, selected over people with relevant experience. And that's why some of the frustration with community members coming to these meetings is to see you all come up against these moments of like, wait, how did this happen, or why is this written that way? But that's because you all were set up, it was designed this way to erase that kind of knowledge. So members like Janet Haynes and Dick Sobel were not considered, even though they were eminently qualified. But I take your point, and I want to be respectful of your time. I want to make some points about the Citizens Academy that you guys were all talking about and the training that seems to involve role-playing. I want to point out that I think it is grotesque the way, Jane Lum, you mentioned twice how useful it was to role-play scenarios under which you would kill someone. And I think you actually leaned over to Commissioner Santaroche to laugh and say that actually you made a mistake every time. Couldn't hear you correctly. Did you say that you shot every single
No,
person?
I was killed every time.
It is so unbelievable that in the wake of Ora Rosser's death, it seems like the Citizens Academy is only a couple years old. The city has set up training programs so that people in positions of power can fantasize and imagine what it would be like to be okay with killing someone. And it is grotesque that you as a public servant think this is some useful kind of training. It is not analogous to being a doctor or being trained to be a lawyer. It is a special case in our society. It is a full quarter of the city budget, and it is a particular class of people who are allowed to kill other people. There's no analogous case. And that you derive some kind of pleasure from it, that you think it's useful and enjoyable, is unbelievable. Given that this is actually happening in the wake of Ora Rosser's death, it appears to be some way that Ann Arbor continues to suggest that everything is okay here, that policing here is different than other places, that her death was justified, even though she was routinely defamed by the mayor and others, and it was classified in all the ways it has been in other places in the country. Her humanity was denied her, not the humanity of police officers. So I would actually like for you all, if you do this, to come back and share when and how these trainings appeared, what's the research, what's the methodology that this is supposed to actually help people understand how policing works, and if it in fact is just a simple way the city has set up another PR mechanism in the wake of Ora Rosser's death to demonstrate that it's acceptable to kill members of our community, which I don't think it's acceptable, and I think it's grotesque that you like to cosplay at this like it's some joke, Jane. And the last thing I would like to say is that I think it'd be worthwhile for you all to think about the ways in which gender and other kinds of dynamics play out in your meetings, given that while the time for community members is limited, you have specific members of the commission who hold almost all the space, who interrupt female colleagues, who point and yell and argue, and actually control, even though I agreed with almost every point you made, who control space in a way that eliminates the possibility that this could be an open forum. I'll stop there.
First of all, I want to say, when you were talking about the 30-day between the police and the city prosecutor, we went through all this till almost 3 a.m. with the city council one night. And I believe, and you can check, I know these two council people should know, but they're not, I don't think, giving all that they do know on a positive note. Because they weren't for this commission. Let me just say that. You got liaison people here that were against us having this commission. So, they talked about a 14-day. They got 14 days to do something with a complaint. You need to check into what that's all about. You're talking about 30 days, they're talking about something about 14 days. And I don't quite remember what that was. It was,
All I'd say is that the city attorney was at every meeting until wee hours in the morning, and the fact that it is somehow a surprise to the city attorney's office that it takes all this labor seems
Right.
ridiculous, and it's
because
not.
they pointed out this 14 days that they got to get things together. So, and the other thing I want to talk about, because I'm a little stressed about how you pick these liaisons, even though it's okay how you pick them, but please don't forget, I have asked this commission on 2 occasions, is it okay if I help someone, can I bring someone's complaint? And I didn't get an answer. So I didn't feel I could do this. And then I come to a meeting tonight and you got 2 liaison people. I don't care about that, it's fine however many liaison, but don't take us that have worked so hard and have got people talking to me about how can they make a complaint, how do we do this, and I can't answer because I don't know what you're doing until tonight, which sounds like, you know, some of us can't, I don't know what we can do. I have asked could I bring people to a meeting with a complaint. Can I bring the complaint? And I didn't get a response. So it feels like you're gonna have certain liaison people and then other liaison people that put in a lot of work in this, in creating this body. This took a lot of work and a lot of fighting. Because they didn't even recognize that Aura was killed. They still don't recognize it. They don't apologize for it, they don't recognize it, they don't do nothing other than create this body and don't want you to understand or to stand up and do what you need to do for that woman who's dead and the rest of this community so it doesn't happen again. So, and like Sergeant said, we did have a lot of people that would have been qualified to help you that purposely didn't get picked. So we're working around all these obstacles to try to help you to do the job that I know that you want to do. But I'm gonna be here in your face, in your behind, to try and make you do it the way this community needs to be helped and make sure that this doesn't happen again. I am just so upset that even the city prosecutor, whatever she is, works in the city prosecutor's office, who I went to a debate talking about restorative justice and how she's behind this and she's behind that, who has been an obstacle for this commission. So I'm just saying, you got all these little things, these factors that are working against you, and I don't know if you know it like we know it, but that's one of the reasons we're here, to help you to know what obstacles you have, so that we can make this work. And I think it's very imperative that you go to these conferences to learn what other commissions are doing and have done. Because how else are you gonna know, since they, on purpose, made sure you didn't have anybody here to help you? And they're not gonna help you, and your liaison people aren't gonna help you. And I can say that as a community person, I done watched them from the very beginning to up to this moment. And it's quite an insult. It's quite an insult. So I'm gonna always be here as much as I can to help and to also lay it out and put it out there when they're not telling the truth. Because it's not fair to us as the community who worked hard to get this commission formed.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.
The next one you said December